He's been unequivocal that this climate gathering in Egypt's resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh must be the place to close the ambition gap, the credibility gap, and the solidarity gap.
It is extremely critical. We have not much time. We are keeping the 1.5 degrees goal, the increase of temperature, as a maximum acceptable on life support. And the machines are shaking, as I said this morning in an intervention. And we are getting close to a tipping point from which on, if we don't change course, the 1.5 degrees will be irreversibly impossible unless a technological miracle happens in between, which of course is not something we can count on.
The implications of the 2.8 degrees Celsius global temperature rise, which reflects the current trajectory, are more scenes like the devastation wrought by Hurricane Ian that barreled through the US state of Florida in late September, or the June monsoon rains that killed over 1,700 people in Pakistan, as the issue of financing and technological know-how becomes a critical sticking point between developed and emerging economies.
The emerging economy will say, just a moment, you have polluted for many decades, now we need some room of maneuver in order to be able to develop our countries, and we have technological problems to solve. Now, this blame game would lead nowhere. So what we need now, we had, as you know, several coalitions. It was a suggestion I made in Glasgow, and several countries made agreements between G7 countries, international financial institutions, and the emerging economies themselves. It was true for Indonesia, Vietnam, South Africa, in order to be able to speed the transition. But that is not enough. We need to have an historical pact between developed countries and the emerging economies to be able to put together all the resources, financial and technological, to allow for a global reduction of emissions.
On Ethiopia.
What do you believe are the key building blocks that the parties involved in this conflict need to implement and the international community needs to support them in?
First of all, I spoke with President Obasanjo just a few hours ago, and he was telling me the key question now is implementation. And the implementation is largely, in the disarmament aspect that is probably the most complex, in the hands of the military of both sides to come together and find solutions. And so it's absolutely essential for the international community as a whole to be together with one voice saying this implementation is essential. We cannot accept the idea that this agreement will not be respected and will not lead to peace in Ethiopia.
And on the July grain deal that allowed for the resumption of exports of Ukrainian and Russian food and fertilizer to world markets, and that comes up for renewal by November 19th.
We are totally committed. This is my immediate, most important priority, totally committed to make two things happen. We need to have this deal renewed in the 18th of November, or before the 18th of November, and we need to solve some remaining obstacles to Russian exports of food and fertilizers. And fertilizers here are crucial, because if you have no fertilizers in 2022, you might have no
food in
2023.
Right.
So we absolutely need to remove the remaining obstacles.
Guterres travels to the climate conference, which opens on Monday in Egypt, ahead of his attendance at the ASEAN summit on the 10th and the all-important G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia on November 15th. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.